Good day, greetings to Russian and foreign journalists in the Russian Foreign Ministry Press Center. Let us begin our weekly briefing, and I would like to begin with breaking news. You'll get the extended statement on our news feed. In a nutshell, today, the Foreign Ministry of Russia summoned the ambassador of Japan, and we expressed a protest to him over Terror Drone Corporation, which has headquarters in Tokyo. They had an agreement with the Ukrainian drone company. Systematic provocations by the Kiev regime against civilians and civilian infrastructure in our territory give us grounds to believe that this is a hostile step that is detrimental to the interests of our country security-wise, including the protection of civilians. As we discussed the current state of Russian-Japanese ties, we highlighted that since the officials in Tokyo pursue a hostile policy, unfortunately under the new cabinet as well, our relations have degraded and hit the rock bottom. We also noted that should the Japanese side be interested in resuming the interstate dialogue, it should make specific practical actions to show such a desire, such an aspiration. Let's switch to the schedule of the Foreign Minister. On the 17th of April, Foreign Minister Lavrov will take part in the session of the Foreign Ministers of the CIS. In 2026, Turkmenistan is the chair of the CIS. Foreign ministers will exchange views on topical international and regional agenda items. They will discuss priority tracks of our work within the CIS, including in the context of the 35th anniversary of the CIS. A number of decisions are to be taken. They seek to increase foreign policy coordination, expand interaction in law enforcement, cultural and humanitarian tracks. The ministers are to discuss granting the status of basic organizations of CIS member states to 2 Russian educational facilities. They will take stock of the 2025 plan for multi-level inter-agency consultations within the CIS and the program of actions on stepping up partnership between foreign ministries of the CIS. The majority of the documents that will be endorsed are to be submitted to the heads of state and government of the CIS. On the 17th and 18th of April, Minister Lavrov will pay a visit to Turkey, the city of Antalya, upon the invitation of the Foreign Minister of Turkey to take part in the 5th Antalya Diplomatic Forum. The minister plans to deliver his address to the special session of the forum. He also plans to have bilaterals with foreign counterparts. They are to discuss key aspects of the international agenda, including the situation in the Middle East, South Caucasus, the Black Sea region, as well as relevant topics of relations with certain states. Moving on to the relevant international agenda, the situation in the Middle East and the Gulf. The comment on this topic will be manifold. It will have several parts in line with the developments that we have seen over the past 24 hours, and given the questions that we received from you, should you be willing to get some extra information, I would be happy to give it to you following the introductory remarks. On the 17th of April, the UNSC considered a draft on the Strait of Hormuz. It was submitted by the delegation of Bahrain. 11 members voted in favor. 2 countries, Pakistan and Colombia, abstained from voting. Russia and China voted against it. And as a result, the document was not adopted. The Bahraini document, if adopted, could make a dangerous precedent in international maritime law. It was non-balanced, it had loop-sided anti-Iranian language, and it had not mentioned the root causes of the developments in the Gulf, namely the US and Israeli aggression against Iran. we were concerned that the anti-Iranian resolution of the UNSC could damage a fragile mediated negotiating process on de-escalation. These discussions were discreet lately, and the reports on US-Iranian understandings on the ceasefire confirmed that we made the right decision on the Bahraini initiative. Russia proposes to focus on calls to swiftly put an end to the confrontation and to launch a full-fledged political and diplomatic process to settle the situation in the Gulf. The Russian delegation announced, as you might know, an alternative draft resolution on the 7th of April that seeks to achieve these goals. Let me once again draw your attention to the full-fledged address by Mr. Nebenza, Russian permanent representative to the UN. He outlined Russian approaches in general. He also gives a detailed overview of the draft submitted by Bahrain and the things that we're not happy about in this document and why we voted in the manner that we did. And certainly, I believe that the whole world observed the situation on the ground with a lot of concerns. We get a lot of questions asking us for comment. Russia welcomes the arrangement on cessation of hostilities between the US and Iran. From the first days of the destructive war unleashed by the US and Israel, Russia has been standing for the ceasefire and resuming political and diplomatic solution. We've been consistently working in this direction, including within the United Nations Security Council. We had close coordination with other responsible members of the international community, and certainly special praise should be given to the positive mediatory role by Islamabad. Ahead of us is a serious effort to put an end to the conflict, respecting the rights and interests of all the regional stakeholders, and as a result, there should be no resumption of such military crises that are man-made, that are not provoked by anything. Long-term peace should be ensured, just like the security in the region, and we will continue to actively facilitate these means. I would also like to comment on the attacks on peacekeepers of the UN Interim forces in Lebanon. They took place in end March. On the 29th and 30th of March, 3 Indonesian servicemen died, 5 persons were wounded. Such tragic cases, unfortunately, are not an exception. They are a follow-up to a deliberate number of attacks on peacekeeping missions. As you know, the UNSC members responded to this incident. On the 1st of April, there was a communique condemning this murderous incident, and naturally we fully supported this statement. As a permanent member of the UNSC, we express condolences to the families of those who perished. We supported the mandate of the UN Interim Forces in Lebanon, and we emphasized the need to respect the inviolability and security of peacekeeping troops and facilities. And there is a call to the UN Secretariat to investigate the developments and to brief the international community, primarily the countries supplying troops. It also emphasized the need to completely implement the key resolution UNSC 1701 that regulates the state of affairs on the blue line between Israel and Lebanon, and it highlights firm commitment to sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We note that the Russian delegation took active efforts to ensure the adoption of the UNSC resolution. or rather the press communique, and we believe it is important to send a message supporting the blue helmets that virtually were attacked in southern Lebanon, including their location in Lebanon. We consistently draw the attention to the dangerous degradation of the situation in Lebanon, including the emergency humanitarian needs of the civilians amid the Israeli campaign and the threats of large-scale collapse and destabilization in the country. We believe that the destructive escalation of violence in Lebanon should not be factored in this overall regional crisis, because it is a result of an unprovoked armed aggression by the US and Israel in the Middle East. Basically, when it comes to the repercussions, not only policy-wise, but also these developments affected the global situation in the world. And a case in point is the report by the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. It issued the relevant report, Global Repercussions of the Conflict in the Middle East in Agricultural and Food Sector in 2026. We carefully studied this report, and by the way, the relevant reports were also published by the UNWFP, the UNDP, the UNCTAD as well. Basically, well, we can hardly say that they express a lot of concern. They rather make a lot of alarming forecasts regarding the repercussions of the reckless campaigns, just like we see in case of the US and Israel in the region. The FAO document notes the central role of the Gulf countries in global energy system. It highlights that they are the key hub for the production and supply of nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers, primarily urea. We're talking about 30% of global supplies, and ammonia over 20%. The countries of the region account for 44% of global sulfur supply. And in this regard, clearly the conflict in the Middle East and limitations to the navigation through the Strait of Hormuz disrupted the raw materials supplies. Markets respond in a negative way, and we expect growing costs throughout the whole supply chain, including the work of the agricultural enterprises, transportation, irrigation, storage, and so on. There is a price hike on fuel, and probably there will be an outburst in demand on bioethanol and biodiesel, rape oil and soya oil, sugar cane as well. Emergency measures taken by the International Energy Agency, that released 400 million barrels of oil from its strategic reserves, can only ensure short-term effect for the prices, and therefore FAO urges to ensure alternative transport routes, because promptly normalizing the situation amid the hostilities that we've witnessed up until recently is something that was not possible. The situation is urgent because the countries that depend on the import of fertilizers do not have strategic reserves, and at the end of the day, this will have less harvest in the region, and the most affected are Bangladesh, Thailand, Sri Lanka. It all should have started in early April or May. On the 3rd of April, FAO published the updated food price index for March, and it continued to grow, amounting to 128.5 points, namely a growth by 2.4% has been a growth on all the major goods. At the same time, it is noteworthy to mention that thanks to the storage of grain, we managed to contain a price hike, and at the same time, the organization claims that it is premature to talk about a looming global food crisis, although we have very alarming trends. The main risks are related with the accessibility of energy and fertilizers. Would like to note the following thing. None of the organizations that I've listed before does not mention the root causes of the situation around the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about the unprovoked and unjustified aggression by the US and Israel and the natural right of Tehran to self-defense, by all means accessible. The UN once again uses its textbook, and probably the assessment of the FAO experts regarding the developments in the food markets are quite moderate, well, at least for now, although let me once again stress that they clearly say that there is a trend and there is no attempt to hush up the repercussions of the reckless campaign that we're witnessing. Moving on to the situation around Ukraine, I wanted to start with an important announcement. On the 8th of April, all-style 235th anniversary of the accession of the peninsula of Crimea, since it joined our homeland. This followed a decree by Catherine the Great. We will dedicate a lot of materials in the upcoming days on this occasion. Please follow our accounts and social networks. But let me also note that there is another document, the federal law of 2018. And according to this law, the 19th of April is the day when Crimea, Taman, and Kuban became the part of the Russian Empire. Now moving on to the situation around the Ukrainian crisis and specific examples of what is happening there. The Kiev neo-Nazi regime does not cease terrorist attacks against civilians of Russia. It deliberately makes drone and missile strikes against non-military facilities, residential houses, social medical facilities, civil infrastructure. Throughout the last week alone, victims of the Western-encouraged terror by Ukraine totaled over 188 persons, including 11 minors. I understand that in the West, for many decades, they encouraged and not ignored such bastards as Epstein. And the West doesn't care about good treatment of children. Still, the world was shaken as it saw the real face of the collective West. Such people as Epstein made it to the elites there, and together with the ruling regimes, they were making democracy. After that, they could have seen something real when it comes to their treatment to children. 11 minors suffered from the attacks of the terrorist regime in Kiev throughout 1 week alone. Maybe it is already enough for the West to see things clear. 11 victims. And 3 children that died. I've mentioned 188 persons 25 were killed among them. Now I'd like to present you with specific numbers, facts, and places regarding what the Kiev regime has been doing in the Bryansk region. On the 31st of March, the Ukrainian armed forces made a deliberate strike using checkmate vampire systems on a regional center of Suzemka, Vladimir region. On the 7th of April, the drone attack in the Alexander region killed 2 adults and a child. There was also a 5-year-old girl, a daughter of those parents that were killed. She survived, but she got seriously injured. The Belgorod region, Ukrainian barbaric attacks killed 5 people, injuring 59. The DPR, on the 5th of April, the Ukrainians made a combined attack on Zuyev and Starobersh thermal power plant using graphite bombs to destroy high-voltage electrical equipment. This munition was used by the U.S. in Iraq in 1991, and in 2003 they were used by the U.S.
And in Serbia, they were used by the U.S. in 1999. On the 6th of April, in the center of Donetsk, 3 women were wounded by a drone strike in the center of Donetsk. Also, during a repeated attack, Yevgeny Bykovsky, Izvestia correspondent, was wounded. And yesterday we made comments on this situation specifically. In Zaporozhye, on the 31st of March, a dark day for residents of Vasilievka, bomb strike against a residential area, 3 civilians killed, including a 12-year-old girl and 91-year-old woman. 4 people, including a 4-year-old child, were wounded. Also, there was an attack against the city's industrial zone, and Ukrainian drones targeted an ambulance. It was not empty. It was carrying a medical team who narrowly escaped death. And on the 1st of April, drones attacked the central clinical hospital of this region. A woman was killed and a medical worker was wounded. In Velikaya Znamenka, because of the strike, 7 children were wounded and 3 adults. In Novorossiysk, on the 5th of April, a Ukrainian drone struck an apartment building, and many apartments were damaged. In Lugansk region, private homes were attacked. An entire family was killed, parents and their 8-year-old child. On the 5th of April, an attack against Belarusianska mine in Lutugina district. Now the miners have been evacuated to the surface, but they were blocked because of the attack. In Kherson region, the Holy Dormition Church was attacked. Icons were damaged. Iconostasis almost completely destroyed. Russian law enforcement agencies continue to gather evidence to prosecute Ukrainian militants and foreign mercenaries. Roman Rogozin is charged with the 2016 attack on the Russian embassy in Kiev. Bryansk terrorist attacks charges have been made against the 143rd Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade militants Vasil Login and Bogdan Svigun. A case has been opened against Oleg Dechevsky, a member of the 425th Separate Assault Regiment, and Vitaly Subota, member of the 80th Separate Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Colonel Alexander Konev, commander of the 92nd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Alexander Krunichenko and Mykola Semenyuk and Sergey Semenyuk have been charged with committing a terrorist attack. They shot and killed a public figure, the head of the region. Those people admitted their guilt, and their cases have been sent to the local court. Russian investigators study the bodies of citizens who have been killed because of the Ukrainian aggression. The village near Lesnaya Dacha, 260 civilian bodies found with bullet wounds, shrapnel wounds, missing limbs. In this mass grave, approximately 300 more bodies could be present. And now regarding the children for whom, in words, the Kiev regime cares so much. What the Kiev regime does with Russian children, I have already mentioned that, and Mr. Miroshnik, who is in charge of the violations of the Kiev regime, he does that regularly. The facts of abuse and harassment and killing of children. Although we do not divide children, because for us every life of a child matters. But what the Kiev regime does with its own children, that they hate our children, as they say, someone else's children, it's clear, but what they do with their own children. From March the 26th to March the 29th, Zelensky toured the Persian Gulf. We have mentioned this during our briefing on the 1st of April. During his visit to Qatar, for some reason he did not find expressions for gratitude to Doha for facilitating the reunification of at least 100 children with relatives in Russia. And the families reunited. Why didn't you find the words? Because it's about investment and energy resources. Yes, for that he's thankful. And for weapons supply, yes, you know why the Ukrainian citizens die. But when it's about children, and Zelensky not being able to monetize that immediately. But there is one more issue, this children's rights. Ukraine needs it only for propaganda on international platforms. And when he does not thank for reunification of families, children who come back to Russia, or children who find their relatives in Ukraine, constructive work should be admitted, and the fact that they were not stolen in Moscow but someone, but they were separated by hostilities and by the tragedy for so many years, unwinding before the eyes of its sponsors. Zelensky cannot admit that. To do something that could somehow not destroy but to put obstacles to his propaganda of a false myth. Neither children nor their prosperity are of interest to the Kiev regime. You can have a look at the National Social Service of Ukraine data on the situation of minors in Ukraine. It's about domestic violence in Ukraine. In 2025, 585 children suffered from that. But a third of crimes, it's not about domestic violence, it's about crimes of sexual nature. In Ukraine, they have revealed the cases of systematic harassment, restrictions in food and abuse of guardianship rights, violations of sanitary and epidemiological requirements, industrial safety regulations, and inadequate care in different children institutions. In total, in 2025, almost 13,000 such violations were recorded in Ukraine. But they're just talking at international platform that Russia puts obstacles to their life, but it's their domestic problems. Just instead of getting some powerful solution, it's aggravated by lies that they present as the truth. Now it's about child trade in Ukraine, trade in children. 8 children were victims in 2025, 10 in 2024, 118 in 2023, and 3 children in 2022, according to the same National Social Service of Ukraine data. But actually, Ukraine is one of the leaders in illegal transplantation, and orphans are most vulnerable, who are often sent abroad under the guise of humanitarian actions, allegedly for their own sake, but then their traces are lost. Facts have been repeatedly published of illegal transfer of children to EU countries, to the United States, including for adoption into LGBT families. In December 2025, the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine reported the uncovering of a criminal group involved in the illegal transfer of children to the West for so-called adoption by foreign citizens. In this regard, the issue of the return of evacuated children from the EU is urgent. That's according to the National Social Service of Ukraine. In 2022, 196, not children but orphanages, with 4,811 children. They were transported abroad, and 1,340 children still remain abroad, where they are systematically subjected to physical and psychological abuse. Now it's about Yelena Zelenska's foundation. Children transported to Europe and to Turkey, where they were deprived of proper supervision, physical and psychological abuse, and 2 girls became pregnant by local hotel workers. So that's charitable work by Yelena Zelenska. And it's information from all over the world. Yes, they can tell the truth, but they keep silent about persecution of Russian-speaking children. On the 6th of April, Ukrainian education expert Ivana Kabernik reported that approximately 40,000, just imagine 40,000, children in Ukraine do not attend schools in Western Ukraine because they face ridicule and insults. It's not children quarrels, it's just the result, the consequences of the policy of language terrorism Ukraine is conducting. To avoid this, parents are trying to provide their children with the opportunity to somehow study remotely. The head of the Lviv City Council's Department of Education and Culture, Andriy Zakharova, tried to deny those scandalous revelations. He said that conflicts could be possible in Ukraine, but urged not to generalize and not to present it as a mass phenomenon. Yes, of course, so many children, but it's not a mass phenomenon, allegedly. Who will we believe? A person who has said that this problem exists. It's of mass nature. Harassment on the basis of language, on national basis in Ukraine, and people who do not find common ground because they are children. So please do not invent those fake stories. We see this hatred of Russian language, of the Russian language pouring out of Ukrainian television and the officials, neo-Nazis and Banderites. Just watch our news, our TV channels. Can you find some program where we would mention impossibility to speak their mother tongue in Russia, for example, the Ukrainian language, or calls on the radio or in the press? If you hear a person speaking with an accent that reveals that the person is from the territory of Ukraine, have you heard any derogatory statements formed in the Russian mass media? Some derogatory abuse against nations, peoples residing in Ukraine? Have you heard anything like that? But we just mentioned that we are close peoples, that we have common history, that famous figures of education, culture and science, they should not be divided. They had their own, their common motherland. In Ukraine it's different. Actually, minors are not protected by the state there, because it's the Kiev regime that's not a state, it's a quasi-state. It just seems to perform those state functions, but state is about caring for citizens, caring for vulnerable groups of population, but the regime is a different thing. It's what is happening in Ukraine now. So the facts cited by us, the facts of violation, they just confirm that children are expendable for Kiev regime. Like adults who are hunted, who are tied to poles, who are beaten for having dared to ask for medicine in Russian, or to ask time in their own, in their mother tongue, in Russian. Their role is the role of cannon fodder in Ukraine, and minors are used for propaganda purposes. And they physically and psychologically abuse children. It's even in a more cruel way than the treatment of adults. So they should be telling them that they can be happy, not by hating someone, but by loving. They use the issue of children, first of all, to conceal their own crimes and crimes against children includingly. They are hostages of the neo-Nazi regime, which does everything it can to cling to power, and endlessly, constantly. being insatiable and enriching itself. Now about the mobilization in Ukraine. Amid the growing losses among the Ukrainian armed forces, the mobilization plan has been raised from 30,000 to 35,000 people, and ordinary Ukrainians have already experienced this tightening of mobilization methods of this regime. Now we have testimonies. It just can be called, I beg your pardon, a human safari by the Territorial Center of Recruitment officials. Citizens are being hunted on the streets with their children in shops and cafes, in business and residential areas, in apartment and public areas. People taken from hospitals, from workplaces. People are maimed, beaten nearly to death, subjected to tear gas. Now this permissiveness of the Territorial Center of Recruitment of Ukraine, it leads to brutal abuse on the streets, not on battlefield, but directly on the streets. It's not some work of artificial intelligence or some staging by a Mosfilm. It's not subject to any criticism. Those people who have suffered from the Territorial Center of Recruitment, they have families, they have names, we have data about them. They do not conceal them. It's such a flagrant situation that the Kiev regime, more and more self-accusing comments appear.
For instance, recently, the commissioner, so-called military commissioner of Ukraine, tried to pretend to be puzzled over the recruitment of thousands of people who are not suited for service, and Human Rights Commissioner of Verkhovna Rada, Dmitry Lubinets, basically recognized that there is a problem of men being trapped and people are being treated as animals and then they are sent to slaughter. In many settlements and small towns of central, eastern, and southwestern regions of the country, there are virtually no men, but the military commissars cannot get enough. I'm not talking about ordinary staff, I'm talking about those who make these criminal orders, and behind them are the West with this money. Now they intend to recruit women as well. A growing number of Ukrainians without medical or military education find themselves in draft dodger lists. And there are references made on that there are technical glitches, and it's not by chance that we see banners and billboards in Ukraine with the motto, "The protection of Ukraine is women's cause." End of quote. And there was a recent statement made by retired Major General Sergey Lavrov. He stated that the most efficient way to fill in the ranks of military units of the regular army is to engage women, especially those whose spouses died or are fighting. It is well known that in certain areas there are gangs that are dressed as officials, and they threaten those who they capture in case they do not pay a ransom. And they divide this ransom among themselves and regional and central authorities. On the 6th of April, the Economic Truth newspaper reported that there is a whole system established to dodge drafting It will take $300 to $2,000 to delete your name from the list of dodgers, and the draft notice immunity will cost you $4,000 to $6,000, and the most costly service is to register disability with the way to leave the country, and it costs up to $50,000. The newspaper notes that the higher risk to find yourself in Ukrainian army, the costlier it gets. The indifference of the Kiev leadership to its people does not give any motivation to the population, and there are high rates of not only draft evasion but also defecting. According to military psychologists, Ukrainians flee training units of the Ukrainian army. They do anything to get away from it. At the same time, there is a growing resistance to this forced drafting. People start to rebel to this people from the recruitment office, using even cold steel and firearms or even live grenades. And there's an easy way for them to get to the home front from the front. All the facts that I've mentioned confirm that the tasks to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine are relevant, as well as to get rid of the threats stemming from its territory, and they will definitely be achieved. We talked about that today, and just like previously, we give you examples of how they've been abusing a lot of children due to linguistic grounds. They are being bullied for speaking Russian, for using Russian as they should do, using it as their mother tongue. We talk about this regularly. We talk about the fact that the West does not respond to that. It just makes the paycheck for these crazy, frenzy ideas of the Kiev regime. One might think that the West, Canada, the US are new Spartans. They are cold-hearted. They do not feel the kind of pain felt by people that are denied of the right to use their mother tongue. Allegedly, they do not understand why it is wrong, because they do not feel empathy. But there is an interesting case that happened in Canada. It is so engaged in all the Ukrainian developments. It so supports the Kiev regime. And there's been a scandal around a video address by Director General of the key Canadian air company, Air Canada. I'm talking about Michael Russo, who expressed his condolences over the air flight incident in New York on the 22nd of March. An aircraft clashed with a fire engine, killing 2 pilots. 13 persons were injured. We express condolences to the loved ones of those who perished. It is noteworthy that Michael Russo delivered his speech in English. He only used 2 French words, bonjour in the beginning and merci in the end. Air Canada is covered by the Canadian Federal Official Languages Act. According to this document, an air company should ensure access to its services and communications on 2 languages, English and French. And Michael Russo clearly violated this norm, and therefore it gave them ground to the all-national argument scandal in Canada. Of course, everybody understood what he was talking about, but they didn't find words in French in the text that they understood in English perfectly, but at the same time, they followed the spirit of the law of Canada, the people in Canada said that that's not the way to behave. The head of the Ministers' Cabinet in Canada, and come to think of it, it's not just some commonplace scandal or argument, but the head of the Ministers' Cabinet of Canada, Mark Carney, condemned the decision to make an address solely in English, and he called it, you wouldn't believe it, but this is the high level of cynicism, he called this address solely in English as an address that lacks feelings and compassion. The current Prime Minister of Canada or the former Prime Minister of Canada could support financially, militarily the Kiev regime. Nothing impeded him from doing that. And for many years, this regime does not allow for the opportunity to publish official documents in the Russian language that is a mother tongue for most of Ukrainians. It is bullying its citizens for speaking this language in the street, using their native tongue, the Russian. Mark Carney also emphasized that this statement did not meet, and I'm really scared of you becoming too emotional. This statement did not meet the expectations of the country, where the languages of Shakespeare and Molière are enjoying an equal status, as he has put it. You know, if we were talking about a prime minister of a country, of a state that didn't know or was not involved in the situation around Ukraine, I would understand that. Indeed, a country or a politician doesn't care at all about what happens on the other continent. He is dealing with his own problems, he's sorting out the mess or preventing riots. But we're talking about Canada, the very Canada that for many years has been cheering the Kiev regime, be it Zelensky, Poroshenko, Ternibok, Yatsenyuk, you name it. And it gives a green light to any step, any act. On top of that, they even fund it. Turns out that according to them, it is so important to meet the expectations of a country where the languages, well, in their case, the language of Shakespeare and Molière, and in this case, the language of Pushkin and Gogol, Bulgakov and Tolstoy, and there are hundreds and thousands of authors that you cite, and these languages enjoy an equal status. Over the past years, over the past months, take a look at how many legal acts were adopted in Ukraine that leaves using Canadian handouts and funds, and how many acts were adopted against the Russian language that is a mother tongue for many Ukrainians. I believe that the Prime Minister of Ukraine talks about Ukraine on a daily basis, even without any occasion whatsoever. Certainly, this was all going unnoticed. There's been a wave of outrage in the French-speaking province of Canada, Quebec, home to the captain of the air crew. And the Prime Minister of the province, François Legault, called this case a flagrant one, and he said that this is a disrespectful video with regard to the French-speaking clients and the personnel. And as a result, the board of Air Canada announced that Director General Rousseau will resign by the third quarter of 2026. They fixed everything, and at the end of the day, Canada could sleep calmly. The expectations are met. This case is curious for us, not because it's funny, but from a different perspective. Here we see a clear example of atrocious hypocrisy. It kills all standards whatsoever. We see showing Canadian hypocrisy in linguistic affairs. In Ukraine, these very Canadians are among the co-sponsors of the cultural and humanitarian genocide regarding the Russian-speaking population. One might say that they are among the top supporters of this genocide because from Canada, instructions were sent to Kiev as well as textbooks on Ukrainization and uprooting the Russian language and culture. That means that the bilingualism in Ukraine was uprooted by Canada. In principle, in one specific case, the linguistic proportion, the linguistic balance was violated, and this prompted the whole of Canada to be outraged. Let me emphasize that in Canada, any violation of the bilingualism is almost a crime, and it is a subject to all national discussion and the severe repercussions. We see such hypocrisy by linguistic hypocrites. But are we talking about all Canadians? The answer is clear. Of course not. But there are those who so zealously support the Kiev regime, and they should understand definitely that they have been hypocritical to the core. I've mentioned at the previous briefing that we will prepare a separate text on the violation of the maritime law and the hybrid war unleashed by the West against Russia. One of the main tracks is to limit access of our country to strategic maritime communications to supply Russian energy and to increase transport costs. In the beginning, West was focused on the Baltics, but once the Russian Navy took measures to escort civilian vessels, they covered the English Channel and the Mediterranean. The vessels that carry Russian energy are recognized as substandard, and they are listed within the shadow fleet list. Although a couple of years ago, these very vessels were in the so-called white lists, and they met the highest of standards. The goal of speculating around this, so to speak, term, the shadow fleet, that has no definition in the international law, is to justify discriminatory measures against the vessels that I've mentioned, including to arrest them using far-fetched pretexts, including violation of international sanctions that were imposed by the EU. Such steps, states as France, Belgium, Sweden, Finland, Estonia, and Germany inspect and arrest vessels that meet all the criteria of free and unimpeded navigation. The recent incident with the Terra tanker was, it was seized by the Belgians together with the French in the exclusive economic zone of Belgium. The Kafir bulk carrier and CO1 tanker was detained by Sweden. The Dana tanker that was seized by the French together with the Brits in high seas is a case in point. The West tries to explain that flagless vessels cannot enjoy the freedom of navigation. It is noteworthy that false flags vessels that act and benefit the interests of the European states for some reason, do not fall under such restrictions. The most important thing is not a flag, but the destination, as we see it. If this oil is for the Europeans, it doesn't matter what carries it. There will be no grounds to arrest such vessels, and the European authorities would not find any violations. They would only want to get the energy that they want. Pressure is put on the flag states of vessels that operate in Russian interests, so that in case of an inspection, these countries should refuse to confirm that it has its flag, introducing Russian ship owners into sanctions list and banning port calls for Russian flagged vessels, declaring foreign flag vessels that carry Russian hydrocarbons as a shadow fleet. These are all a violation of the international law, namely the 1982 UNCLOS. The West actively tries to reshape the legal framework in order to give a free hand to its security services. A number of friends with unfriendly regimes, including Estonia, Poland, Finland, and the Netherlands, draft laws and adopt laws to expand the mandate of the relevant authorities to ensure the the safety of navigation. However, these new concepts seek to restrict the freedom of navigation that goes against the international law. On the 15th of December 2025, the EU adopted a declaration on using in full the international maritime law over the threats by, and I quote, the shadow fleet and the need to protect the critical underwater infrastructure. On the 26th of January, 14 littoral states of the Baltic and North Sea signed a letter calling the members of the international community to abide by the international maritime law, including 1982 UNCLOS and the convention adopted under the aegis of the International Maritime Organization. We see clearly that the West does not want to recognize that the root cause behind the restrictions and developments is the restrictions that they impose, and this runs counter to the international maritime law. This shows that the West continues to seek ways to stand in the way of the freedom of navigation. The international law does not have any necessary recipes to this end, and therefore the West has to act in a rather creative or even clumsy way. They fine-tune the existing framework to suit their own interests, and by doing so, the West undermines the basic norms of the international maritime law. It might have a domino effect, and it could put an end to the global maritime trade, and the repercussions will be seen everywhere. Both the Western instigators and the developing countries, especially those who find it essential to have maritime logistics, let alone the threats for the international peace and security. The Russian Federation calls on the international community to take a principled stance supporting the 1982 UNCLOS and not to fall to cave in to the neo-colonial diktat, to join hands protecting legitimate interests of maritime ship owners in good faith. Moscow believes that the global majority would realize all the risks related with Western attempts to turn the sea into the area of confrontation. We're seriously concerned about the terrorist attacks on trade vessels by the Kiev regime. They are taking place with tacit agreement of Western countries, and we believe that they believe that these actions are acceptable, and one of the latest incidents is the attack by drones on LNG tanker Arctic Meta Gas it sailed under the Russian flag. It took place on the 3rd of March in the Mediterranean. The situation showed that the attacks happen far outside the theater of war, and they take place in various regions of the world ocean. As a result, Arctic matter gas lost its way and gone into the free drift. And this cold blood actions show that the goal was to destroy the vessel and the crew and to create an environmental disaster.
It's a flagrant violation of international maritime law. Not a single European state condemned such illegal actions by its Ukrainian proteges. They're just not only silent witnesses, but also perpetrators of those violations by the Kiev regime. It has been published about violations of by Ukraine, attacks against, as they tell, shadow fleet of Russia in the Mediterranean. A report published by Intelligence Online, the vessel specifically equipped to employ naval drones and looks like a common vessel that goes between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, and the attack on the Russian gas carrier has become the first such operation outside the Black Sea and marked a shift in Ukraine's operation towards the Mediterranean, which it seems could become a new flashpoint. The lack of an adequate assessment of the situation is undoubtedly leading to the proliferation of armed attacks on civilian vessels and continued violation of international law regarding the prevention of unlawful acts against the safety of civilian shipping. It's necessary to raise those issues in relevant international organizations, and the European states, particularly the United Kingdom and France, are hypocritically promoting documents condemning attacks on merchant vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. So what double standards are those? On the 18th of March, there was an extraordinary session of the Council of the International Maritime Organization convened, as you would guess, by the United Kingdom, as well as by Egypt, Qatar, Morocco, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and the Philippines and France. They considered the situation in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, and the Gulf of Oman. The Russian mission to the organization reported unprecedented attacks and detentions of civilian vessels in the Mediterranean, Baltic, and the Black Sea, as well as the Arctic Ocean. In particular, situation with Arctic meta gas carrier. Russia will continue to work practically and in theoretical dimension to convey to the international community the idea of an admissibility of violating international maritime law and to use not only legal and terminological possibilities but also vivid examples of such violations. Of course, we will use the political, legal and other instruments at our disposal to ensure respect for the principle of freedom of navigation. One more date that should have been marked differently in another atmosphere. 34 years ago, diplomatic relations have been established between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Moldova. It was on the 6th of April 1992. Dialogue was established, trade ties were developing, close cooperation was maintained, and since 1996 the Intergovernmental Governmental Commission on Economic Cooperation operated. There were 16 meetings of this commission. The last was held on the 2nd of October 2020, and Parliament's ministries, agencies regularly compared their positions. There were active consultations, regional ties strengthened. A solid bilateral legal framework has been established, comprising 70 active interstate and intergovernmental agreements, as well as 17 agreements on trade, economic, scientific, technical, and cultural cooperation. It was not only bilateral but also multilateral cooperation, primarily within the CIS. In 2021, Russia ranked second in Moldova's trade. Bilateral trade turnover amounted to $1.3 billion. From 2011 to 2021, Moldova's GDP reached almost 41%, and 2% due to the Republic's participation in the CIS processes. So that interaction yielded considerable dividends to Moldova. So then came to power. Would it be suitable? She was brought to power. Sandu was brought to power in Moldova, and the situation in official relations between our country changed drastically. It did not change itself. It was changed by those brought to power by the West in Moldova, imposed to the Moldovan people. We are doing that in order to demonstrate that deathly policy by Sandu. And common citizens of Moldova, they continue to treat Russia as a friend. They do not see this enemy that the current Chisinau regime is trying to present them. It's not just Moldova's turning to the West, but it's something inside out, what the Sandu regime is performing. It has had a negative impact on the Moldovan economy and hit the country's citizens hard. So it's turned to the West. Does it have some profitable results for Moldova? No. Moldova is not turning, it's just denying itself. It's to the detriment of its industry, denying its own history. Trying to reformat the people of Moldova. It's not the Moldovan language, it's the Romanian language now. Now it's not the Moldovans, but allegedly now the Romanians. It has been so painful for the citizens of this country. Because of that policy by pro-Western forces headed by Sandu, the trade turnover fell by more than fourfold. And the EU did not compensate anything. No one compensates anything, and Moldova's trade deficit has exceeded $7 billion. It's accompanied by rising prices, inflation, mass impoverishment of the population. Why are the Moldovans suffering from this punishment? Actually, we should not be pathetic here, but those countries who yield in surrender in the fight for their sovereignty, they turn into an instrument of implementation of geopolitical ambitions. That's the cost of Russophobia. We hope that Chisinau will find forces to overcome that. Russia stands for equal and mutually respectful dialogue between our countries and between the peoples of our countries. We have actually mentioned this topic, but I would like to come back to this issue once again. It's the date of memory of the victims of the genocide of the Soviet people. This date is approaching, and we're trying to cover this very important critical issue. And we do that on digital resources of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and on websites of Russian missions abroad. That's to add to the diplomatic work that's conducted by our diplomats abroad on the platforms of international organizations. Together with our partners at the Russian Military Historical Society and the National Center of Historical Memory under the President of the Russian Federation, we publish historical materials on the crimes of the Nazis and their collaborators during the Great Patriotic War of 1941-1945. It's a comprehensive collection of materials published for the first time, systematization of numerous testimonies published under the hashtags No Statute of Limitations and Archives of Speaking. It's to promote historical truth and to perpetuate the memory of the victims of Nazi genocide. The publications are translated into foreign languages and become accessible to foreign audience. The majority of them has not even heard about those facts. And we continue to update the thematic section on the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs website. This isn't just history. This memory directly impacts the events of the present days. And we know this saying, those who cannot remember their past are condemned to relive it. The inhumane crimes of the Nazis and the subsequent collapse of the Third Reich. Everyone should remember that. Those who are now trying to remilitarize Germany today, the atrocities of the Gauleiters should be remembered, especially in the Canadian Parliament, lest they applaud those whose hands are stained to the elbows in the blood of innocent victims. Those who have with relish slaughtered, killed and burned like the Banderites did it, killed women and children. And for the sake of expediency, some people prefer to forget that and not to know that. We will remind you about the historical truth. Please follow our online resources and do everything that you can. I'm now addressing to the media and competitors, also competitors abroad, in order to popularize this information. Now, by the way, regarding crimes against our country in those years, it's about crimes by Japan against our citizens. We underline that such crimes have no statute of limitation, and the proceedings continue up to the present date. The Prosecutor General's office has announced its decisions to overturn previously issued rehabilitation of 34 Japanese citizens. You can see their full list in the text version of this briefing. They were involved in sabotage and espionage activities, committed crimes against humanity. I will mention this today by some way. Just be patient. Have the will to hear all that, because it's not simple. Following a review of court decisions and cassation of supervisory courts, it was decided that those individuals are not eligible for rehabilitation and their guilt has been totally proven. During our briefings, we have provided information about canceling the rehabilitation of those Japanese war criminals. Naturally, someone might ask, what is the purpose of those measures taken by the Russian law enforcement system? Yes, such crimes have no statute of limitation. That's the name of special information project dedicated to providing information about the genocide of the peoples of the USSR. The date we will mark for the first time at the state level on the 19th of April. But I would like to cite an example that reflects the relevance of such work and its urgency. On the 1st of April, the head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, once again repeated her delusional claims that Russia allegedly attacked 19 countries of the world. She did not provide any specific examples, but I doubt she can name 19 countries without mistake at all. But processes are underway in Japan, where this myth, they're trying to engage in that myth. Some attempts to rewrite the ideological basis and in order to solve this policy of remilitarization and revision of the results of the Second World War, it's actively promoted. Between 1932 and 1940, the Japanese servicemen violated the USSR border, carried attacks against Soviet territory and Soviet vessels, launched 57 sabotage units, killing 80 and wounding 107 Soviet citizens. So that's not counting the full-scale military operations at Lake Hassan and Khalkhin-Gol River. One more threat to peace posed by militaristic Japan. The list will be provided in the text version of the Today briefing. It's the infamous Unit 731 and Unit 100 of the Kwantung Army. What units were they? During one of the previous briefings, we recalled the Nazi Dr. Josef Mengele and his modern-day Ukrainian followers. But even their atrocities are pale in comparison with the brutality of their Japanese counterparts. Yes, it would be hard. Just please be patient now. You should hear that. Deliberate infection of people with pathogens of deadly viruses for the purpose of detailed studies of their effects on the organism, and more effectively studying the effects. The Unit 731 surgeons performed autopsies on living people and methodically removed organs one by one to study how the disease spreads through the body and how tissues change. I would underline once again that was done on living people. You can just imagine that it was no anesthesia. I just have to say now, or maybe just to mention that it's beastly in itself. But it was without anesthesia at all. It's just a plot for some horror, for some thriller. Now, that some mother or some father would not allow to watch their children to watch. But that's their descendants. They just deny that, and they're trying to impose their ideology and to change the Japanese constitution, to legalize weapons. And we should mention that all of that was documented, and all that has the factological basis. Yes, you know very well that it was not just stories passed on from one person to another. Maybe they have acquired some details that do not exist. It's all documented.
Equally atrocious were experiments with frostbite. People were first to strip to the waist or to strip completely. They were taken to the freezing cold, and after that they recorded the stages of frostbite, redness, blisters, necrosis, and the limbs were amputated without anesthesia. In order to create the most efficient biological weapons to use against the USSR, the Squad 731 actively used Russian migrants among those controlled by the Japanese as the most genetically close to the people of the Soviet Union. Once again, we're not talking about a group of crazy people, maniacs, psychopaths. We're talking about actions of the state that were sponsored by the state. They were the state programs. I think that we should specifically say that all those people were purely civilians. Although, could you think of it? Could you even torture military men in such a way? Certainly you cannot. But once again, we have to say that these were civilians. Not a single human rights document that has to do with the humanitarian law and waging hostilities would not allow for it. Actually, these documents do not permit and ban such actions regarding servicemen and civilians. Japanese sadist scientists did not believe that these test subjects were humans. Maybe you believe that this is a figure of speech for me, but no. Do you know how they called people that were test subjects in their internal documents? They called them Maruto, which is translated as logs. That's the way they were treated. Unlike Dr. Mango, and for the third time, let me make this side note. We have to factor this out, and we can say unlike Mango, although Mango is the absolute evil, but it seems that there is another element and another bottom if we're talking about this absolute evil. So unlike Dr. Mango, he managed to flee, but he was condemned by the Nuremberg trials. But the leadership of Squad 731 avoided justice at all. The commander gave himself in to the Americans, and Washington paid tribute to his knowledge and experience and guaranteed freedom in exchange for cooperation. What kind of cooperation are you talking about? The USSR did not cope with that and had its own open and public Khabarovsk process on the 25th and 30th of December 1949. By doing so, the Soviet Union made a decisive contribution not only in the defeat of the militarist Japan, but also in saving the world from biological weapons. It's not just about revenge, but also it's a guarantee that such cases, such atrocities would not repeat themselves. And it is relevant, which is showcased not only by crazy statements by colors, but also by Pentagon's activities and the network of biolabs that they use in their military programs. You remember how many of them were founded in Ukraine, and this is still a running effort. I have to follow up on this historic case. We were appalled by another act of blasphemous desecration of the memory of Soviet soldiers in Lithuania. Vilnius promptly tries to wipe off the history of the Great War and the role of the Red Army in liberation of the Baltic states. And another case in point is the barbaric act committed by Lithuanian authorities in the city of Siauliai. They moved the remains of Soviet soldiers and officers from central squares and parks, and the motive is standard. Allegedly, the tombs of heroes allegedly help advance Russian narratives on the Great Patriotic War. What are the narratives of ours? These are not narratives. These are facts confirmed by the Nuremberg trial. The Lithuanian tomb raiders started desecrating tombs of 53 soldiers and officers of the Red Army, including 3 heroes of the Soviet Union, including Major General Pomoshnikov. They sacrificed their life to liberate the Baltic states from Nazism. The list of those buried whose bodies are desecrated include soldiers from all over Russia and Ukraine. There are Lithuanian and Jewish names, including the namesake of former Israeli ambassador to Moscow, Galperin. I do not know whether they are related, but they have the same family name. Will we hear the protest of the Israeli Foreign Ministry or Yad Vashem? Somebody thinks definitely no, but let's wait. Maybe they will say something. With the support of a local henchman, Nazis destroyed virtually the whole Jewish population of Lithuania. The executioners made their bloody trace in Belarus and Russia, and after the war, surviving nationalists, the so-called Forest Brothers, who are being glorified by NATO, continued to kill their own compatriots en masse, and their ideological successors finish their job. They destroy the memory on Soviet liberators. The organizers of this blasphemous act do not hide that they rush to end their sordid business up until the 9th of May. They are vampires that are scared of the dawn because they understand that they will disappear once the sun is up. Many rank-and-file Lithuanians are outraged with these decisions of the authorities, but they are scared of saying something. Russia can strongly condemns the ongoing state vandalism. The Criminal Code of Russia provides for criminal charges for destroying military burial sites, including the ones abroad. And we urge all human rights activists and watchdogs, all those movements all around the world who seek to protect the historical memory, not to ignore that. You should join hands and you should give the relevant assessment to that, and you should fight against that. Robert Rojestvensky wrote something genius. The living need that, not the dead ones. It is needed to those who will come to the future world, because if you forget about that, and if you allow these blasphemous acts and barbaric actions to gain the upper hand, the history has already told us what happens to these people, and to these peoples, they disappear. On the 25th of March, in the city of Langside in Laos, PDR, there was a ceremony concluding the 8th stage of the demining campaign by the armed forces of the Russian Federation and the engineer troops of Laos PDR. In his address, Deputy Defense Minister of Laos PDR, Kong Tong Sukwang, praised the work of Russian experts, expressing hope that there will be continued cooperation with our country on this track because it bears very useful results for Laos. There's a problem with contaminating a great part of Laos PDR with explosive objects. Let me remind you that from 1964 to 1973, during the war in Indochina, the U.S. aviation, and I will give you the specific number after that, over 500,000 or 580,000 military raids were committed in Laos PDR. Over 3 million bombs were dropped, including cluster munition. Over 30% of them, namely 80 million units, still are on the ground, and they are a risk to the life and health of the civilians. Humanitarian demining is necessary for sustainable social and economic development. It is one of the all-national priorities. And an important assistance is provided by Russian experts. Despite all the risks, they demine immediately on the ground and they share their best practices. Since 2018, Russian sappers cleansed 238.6 hectares of Lao territory. We're talking about the provinces of Bolek, Khamsai, Kramon, Vientiane, Thakek, and Huapuan. They demined 4,367 air bombs, mines, and artillery projectiles. Cooperation between Russia and the Laos PDR on humanitarian demining confirms clearly the strategic nature of bilateral relations. They build upon many years of traditions of genuine friendship and mutual support that were established during the Soviet help to the Lao people. And another important date, on the 12th of April, we will celebrate the Cosmonautics Day, and this date was not chosen accidentally. This very day, everybody learned who Yuri Gagarin is, and the whole humankind learned that for the first time ever, a human being was in the outer space and he was safely back again. Besides that, it was established by the UNGA resolution. This is a historical landmark that paved the way to the exploration of the outer space. It is a triumph of the Soviet science. It is a fulfilling of many hundreds years of dreams of the whole humankind that was made real thanks to the selfless work of scientists. Today we inherited the era of those grand people who were behind the historical achievements and discoveries in the outer space. We're not just cherishing their memory, we try to multiply this heritage, something that was given to us as an invaluable treasure, as Yuri Gagarin put it. In the run-up to the 65th anniversary, we can say that the Russian space sector preserved glorious traditions of the past, but multiplied it as well, created new space launch facilities, rockets, and satellite constellations. There is another important thing. Our country did something that was almost impossible, to give a chance and to give a lot of hope to a great deal of countries to participate in the space exploration to many countries through the training of foreign cosmonauts and joint piloting. I believe that it would be wrong to say, we shouldn't say that, but we will present the special report on the programs that the Soviet Union started in 1970s, and a number of foreign cosmonauts presented by other countries. They didn't have a chance to develop their space programs, but they got a chance to get into the outer space thanks to the Soviet science and the Soviet state, the government and the people of the Soviet Union, naturally. I would like to say that Russia is still the leader in this area. We continue to actively work to develop national space program. We pay special attention to ensuring safety and sustainability of the space activities. On the 17th of June 2025, the new national project, Outer Space, was adopted. It includes 8 federal projects. 2 of them is the space science and space nuclear energy that seeks to explore the solar system, create conditions and infrastructure. And there is project technological system and personnel, and the other projects are modern, competitive access to the outer space, navigation and time, and many others. Within this project, we plan to launch the first nuclear power plant on the moon. It will be the energy foundation for the future moon lunar bases. An important track of Russian scientific program is the development of Earth remote sensing. The Russian orbital group remote sensing unit includes 20 spacecraft. And building upon the data we get, we implement key environmental projects. We monitor ice melting in the Arctic. We explore ways to prevent threats of wildfires. And these initiatives confirm Russia's commitment to global sustainable development goals endorsed by the UN. In 2025, Russia successfully launched 17 rockets. We launched 45 spacecraft of social and economic, scientific, educational, and commercial tracks. We implement our international commitments on the operation of the International Space Station. We are actively developing the Russian orbital station. It would be the new platform for scientific research and testing space technologies. The multifunctional system for personal satellite communication is operating successfully, and there are private initiatives as well. Currently, Bureau 1440 company is working on the Dawn Group. It comprises 300 space aircraft, and it would ensure the speed of up to 1 gigabyte per second. And at the second stage, it would increase the number of satellites up to 900. And even in the Northern Sea route, a human could get all the necessary data, just like in the center of Moscow. On the 23rd of March, the first batch of 16 satellites were sent into the orbit. By 2031, GLONASS and the Dawn system will increase the accuracy, and shortly we'll develop the geological stations, the Yamal type aircraft, building upon the status of the leading space power. Russia has been successfully bolstering constructive interaction with all the participants of the space activities that are interested, and we believe that the Russian Space Forum that is organized for the first time on the 9th of April as part of the Russian Space Week from the 6th to the 12th of April will give an additional momentum to win-win cooperation in the peaceful exploration of the outer space. with all the interested partners. In a nutshell, the outer space is not about the technologies per se that are detached from life. We're talking about our future. Russia wants the outer space to be a space for cooperation, not for war. There should be no behind the closed doors clubs and friend of all principle. This is not our approach. That's not what our predecessors were aspiring for, and that's not why they opened the door for the outer space, so that these clumsy people could pollute the outer space as they did in the earth. If we make the outer space as another theater of war, as somebody tries to do on earth, this would not benefit anyone.
If we keep it peaceful, the entire humankind will win. So we will provide a detailed coverage of the events marking Cosmonautics Day and the 65th anniversary of the first human spaceflight. As you know, we will do it on our social media resources, the Foreign Ministry website, and accounts of our foreign missions, official accounts on social media. And one more important announcement. From the 28th till the 30th of April, in Mineralny Vody, the third Caucasus Investment Forum will be held. The event has become a traditional platform for presenting the economic potential of the North Caucasus region, strengthening mutually beneficial ties with our partners, discussing practical issues, and implementing cutting-edge initiatives. It includes more than 50 events of various fields. The focus will be on trade and entrepreneurship, industry, agriculture, transport and logistics, digitalization, and other relevant topics. The cultural program will include a festival dedicated to the traditions of Russia's regions. Representatives of Russian and international government agencies, business circles, and scientific and expert community will participate. In 2025, it was attended by over 4,000 participants from 32 countries, including leaders and representatives of government structures, companies, experts, and leading media outlets. Around 206 billion rubles worth agreements were signed. And I'm ready to answer your questions. Is International live with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. I would like to hear your comment, the comment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation about the election of General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, To Lam, as president of the country. Yes, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam has been elected president of the country. It has been a confirmation of the high professionalism of the Vietnamese leader, who on numerous occasions visited our country. Last year he participated in the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the Great Patriotic War victory. We congratulate Comrade To Lam on the election as president of the country. And we hope to maintain partnership for the sake of stability in the Asia-Pacific region and as a whole. Thank you very much. Is El Mayadin with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Our question was about what exactly was the Russian-Egyptian mediatorship in the Middle East and taking into account Pakistan. So now we have changed our question a little bit. because the bombings of Iran continue, the bombings by Israel. Now Israel does not comply with the agreement, as you have already made comments, and Lebanon is a participant in the ceasefire agreement. So how would you comment on that? Let us start with the Russian position and the situation in the region as a whole. Also within the context of the aggression by the United States of America, I would underline once again that the recent events have become a vivid confirmation of the right policy of the Russian Federation, formulated by the President of the Russian Federation and implemented by our country. We have from the very beginning named the things as they are, and we underline that it was unprovoked aggression by the US and Israel against Iran that have caused the crisis, and we have underlined that it will inevitably lead to tragic consequences for the entire world, not only for the region, but for the entire world. Now today, on the basis of the UN documents, we have considered the negative impact. This tragedy that continued before us and before the eyes of the entire world. And it's also in the context of the discussion of the maritime resolution within the UN Security Council, and we have called upon the parties to abstain from hate speech, and we have underlined it was just cried out because so many civilians were killed, primarily children. It's difficult actually to find the words, but keeping silent about those facts, that strategical white noise that has been turned on by many Western media, just deliberately ignoring the mass murder of so many people, primarily children, in the Iranian school as a result of the attack from the air. We have supported efforts by Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt and other states aimed at facilitation of the resolution and dialogue aimed at the settlement in the region, and this has yielded its results. It's a very important example. We can adhere to the truth and to give the truthful assessments of the situation, and to use to the full extent diplomacy and the links we have, the ties, in order to overcome the crisis created by the aggression of the US and Israel against Iran. And we hope that the process of the settlement of the conflict that has started will lead to a stable peace in the region. Yes, I understand very well those risks and problems we will have to face. The region will have to face again, but we are based on the fact that we will continue our efforts. Yes, I'm sure that this is also a reply to the second part of your question. Thank you, thank you. Is China Media Corporation with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, we are here. We have two questions today. As we have mentioned today, the situation around Iran is aggravating, oil prices are growing, and the US are softening some restrictions against the Russian oil, and countries just starting to use those relaxations, and is that a sign that the Western system of sanctions against Russia is beginning to crack under the pressure of geopolitical realities? And Japan is also considering purchasing Russian oil. What's Russian position on this issue? I would like to underline once again that in the face of such illegitimate restrictions by the West, Russia is still a full-scale participant of the energy market and complies with its commitments in energy security, and for the citizens who need energy resources just as consumers. And this fantastically not wise denial of Russian energy resources is Russia has found new centers, focused on new centers of economic growth in the south, in the east. And we hope to increase cooperation with our partners within the EAU, CIS, BRICS, and SCO. Demand for Russian oil and gas is increasing amid the ongoing energy crisis. We have seen many publications. Allegedly, the main beneficiary, according to Western media, of the tragedy unwinding in the Middle East is Russia, because energy prices grew and Russia is earning on that. But just a minute, what is happening with the global market? It has no traces of manipulations by Russia. Russia has just called for long-term, forecastable energy cooperation, not speculative, but not just based on the current situation, but long, stable, and that can be predicted. That will become a basis for global energy security, and those who manipulated, those who used energy for political purposes and for the purposes of political manipulations, those were the countries that cannot just present the outcome of such beastly experiments. Now it's about the purchase of Russian oil by Japan. Our country has never closed the doors to dialogue with those who are ready to conduct it on an equal and mutual respectful basis. It's an energy sphere, I would underline once again, we are ready for equal, mutual respectful partnership. And I would like to remind you about the material we have started our briefing today with, the priorities of the Japanese government now. Instead of acting, supporting the interests of Japanese citizens and companies, to give them the prospects of energy market, to enjoy all the possibilities of the bonuses that are provided by Russia, by its natural resources, the reserves, significant territories, logistics, the Japanese government maintains ties with the Kiev terrorist regime. not to strengthen cooperation for the sake of their citizens, but just to smear themselves with this collaboration with the terrorist regime at Bankova. Do you have any other questions? Yes, thank you. My second question, according to the latest data by OpenRouter, a platform working with API of language models, the global volume of addresses reached 27 trillion tokens, and the volume of addresses in the Chinese language grew by 31.48% compared to the previous week. How do you assess China's achievements in artificial intelligence? We think that China has achieved a leading position globally in this sphere, and many countries just trying to impose their values. To impose values in artificial intelligence alien to some countries, yes, it's not our method. We stand for the development of equal and mutually beneficial cooperation in this sphere aimed at strengthening digital sovereignty and the achievements of China that has reached a lot in this sphere, and we stand for further cooperation beneficial for both our countries in artificial intelligence. It would allow not only to exchange experience, but to work to develop new approaches to digital transformation to adapt to modern challenges. By the way, in coordination with Beijing, Russia is consistently defending our shared values at international forums. Respect for state sovereignty, the central role of the UN, the responsibility of developers and the right of states to control data flows within their jurisdiction. And the Global Organization for Artificial Intelligence Cooperation, its launch could contribute to those purposes. It has been agreed according to the 30th regular meeting by Russian and Chinese representatives in Hangzhou. The meeting was held on the 3rd of November 2025. Also, we will adhere to the specialized UN body, the Global Dialogue on Artificial Intelligence. Its first meeting is planned for the 6th, 7th July in Geneva. And our country's commitment to cooperation in artificial intelligence development, it's enshrined, and there have been documents within BRICS and the SCO, Tianjin Declaration and the BRICS leaders' statements of the 7th of July 2025. Such cooperation opens up opportunities for further implementation of joint projects, the development of innovative products, and the agenda includes interaction in the digital economy, artificial intelligence, transborder commerce, and that's briefly a brief response to your question. And you know, recently I have been informed, just yesterday, our experts said that the school book issued on the basis of the Diplomatic Academy has caused, it was the second re-edition of the school book, dedicated to the issues of artificial intelligence and international security. It attracted the attention of the SCO experts as well, and now we discuss the possibility of its translation into Chinese. So it's a practical step of interaction on international platforms. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Xinhua with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Xinhua correspondent here. Kuomintang party chairman is visiting mainland China. It's the first time that the Kuomintang party delegation is visiting the mainland of China. How would you comment on this visit, taking into account the current international situation? How does Russia assess China's positions and efforts to resolve the Taiwan issue? I would like to start with our traditional approach and to underline once again that, as you know, situation in any context discussed, the Taiwanese issue is a domestic issue of China. I think you are perfectly aware of our position. And the context on the Taiwan issue, they just in accordance with the resolution of the issues in the region, and it's the position reflected in many bilateral documents, also the major documents for interstate relations, including the treaty between the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China on good neighborliness, friendship and cooperation of the 16th of July 2001. So it's the 25th anniversary of this treaty this year.
Let me emphasize that when it comes to the ways to settle the situation in the Taiwan Strait, it is purely the domestic affair of China. At the same time, we note that Beijing consistently claims that the peaceful unification is its priority, and we welcome that. We sincerely hope that the issue will be resolved without detriment to the peace and stability in the region. Thank you. Thank you. Belta, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. I have the following question. Recently, YouTube deleted the channels of key news outlets Belta, ONT, and STV TV channels. Belta had almost 2.5 million subscribers all around the world. And these actions were condemned by a number of journalist organizations, including the Russian Journalist Association, as well as the executive secretary of the CIS Lebedev, Kondrashov, TASS agency, a number of public activists. Although international watchdogs are keeping mum, what is your take on that? You know, for starters, I would like to say that what the video hosting that you've mentioned did with regard to Belarus news outlets, it actually made one movement to destroy the news media, news outlet that was comfortable for millions. And this could be called an outrageous sabotage and act of political censorship. You can name other in other ways. This is the barbaric actions of the 21st century, yet use various pretexts. They cite illegitimate sanctions and fighting fake content. Maybe they should start with themselves. On a daily basis, they have content published by Western officials, and they completely change tone every day, and they do not make any changes to that. But most interesting thing is the community rules. What kind of community are we talking about? Where are these rules listed? Nobody knows that. But we're talking about this just like about the notorious world order or rules-based order. This once again shows that this serves the interest of the West, and they were never interested in the truth, in the pluralism of opinion, in diversity of opinion, the freedom of speech. These are all the foundation of democracy. They were against the pillars of democracy. At the same time, they allegedly supported democracy, claiming that that is their ultimate value. Turns out that they need a sterile and completely loyal broadcasting that is loyal to them and to their values. What is under control can exist. What is at odds with them or even not controlled by them completely, this should be destroyed. While we are well aware of this situation, we have seen this repeatedly. They started blocking Russian media outlets, Russian journalists and activists, and the video hosting that you've mentioned resorted to the outright censorship, closing down foreign ministry, social networks, and we got repeated warnings, so to speak, and it was not clear why. Dozens of video reports and video clips were banned, including address by Foreign Minister Lavrov and our briefings. It is surprising that they are living in their world that they created. Western journalists ask questions to the Foreign Minister of Russia. He answers these questions, and the American video hosting tries to block all that. This is absurd. You've mentioned that there is no response, no feedback. That became a norm to them. International human rights watchdogs are keeping silent. Sexual international commissions are keeping silence. Does it surprise you? It does not surprise us. You shouldn't be surprised. You should fight against that actively. There was no response back then, and there would not be any response today. It's not that this response would change the practice of global corporations, but it would record the facts of violations by these companies, and they are not entitled to designate who should have their say and who should not. It is regretful that we made warnings long time ago and they come true. The appetite is growing, and they continue to silence undesired voices, spreading it to new countries and regions, and they spread it to themselves as well. They cannot contain and deter this information monster that tries to devour their own content makers. They put some labels, they make some white lists and black lists and so on. Therefore, we're talking always about the importance of digital sovereignty, the need to build our own digital infrastructure. I'm not just naming facts. And it is not just an occasion to feel sad and to regret it. We invite our Belarus friends to build up your media presence on Russian platforms. You can come there, you can register on Russian platforms, and at the same time we have our, well, something common, the common media outlet. Thank you. Thank you. Reuters, are you here with us? Madam Zakharova, hello. We have a question to you. It has to do with Ukraine. We have already asked you about that some time ago. Recently, the Ukrainian intelligence claimed that after the beginning of a war by the US and Israel against Iran, Russia provides the list of facilities and infrastructure to Iran for further strikes, and that Russian and Iranian hackers join hands in cyberspace. And we would kindly ask you to comment on these statements. I have a question from the viewpoint of this, so to speak, Ukrainian intelligence. Haven't Iranian hackers joined hands with Russian hackers to meddle in the US election? They joined hands just recently, right? Well, listen. You suggest I take at face value what the Ukrainian intelligence say, but you want to double check it. Let me say that claims on some kind of joint efforts of Russian and Iranian hackers, as you put it, is another lie of the Kiev regime, of the Kiev terrorist groups. And it is ironical that these statements are made by the very group that at the level of security services and using controlled cyber groups and holds a large-scale notorious nefarious campaign against Russia. I'm not talking about information space. I'm talking about cyberspace. They use abuse of Russian citizens. They hack Russian email. They download personal data of Russians. They even attack servers of public bodies, agencies. They block them, and they do other things. So they are the ones who talk about some shenanigans, manipulations, and hackers. They do a lot of criminal things in cyberspace, and they do it openly. They are proud about attempted digital sabotage, and now we understand that it started long before that, and we're not talking about Russian fraudsters that before 2022 claimed to be officials in the bank, but these were the people in call centers organized and controlled by Ukrainian security services. These were Ukrainian citizens as well. And as we see it right now, these call centers are located in the Ukrainian territory. Some of them are identified in other regions on other continents, including in Southeast Asia. People are forced to be there. They are abducted virtually, and they are forced to work there, not as hackers, but as cyber criminals. People are being liberated right now, and we tell you about these examples as well. I would like to emphasize that when it comes to the targets of Ukrainian hackers or even digital criminals, the targets are civilian objects. So we see clear violation of the responsible rules of conduct that was agreed upon within the UN. We can say it right now because we're not talking about some private groups, private criminal groups. This was something organized under the aegis of the Ukrainian, so to speak, state, the Kiev regime. These are specialized units in charge of cybercrime. They recruit rank-and-file citizens. They recruit also capabilities. They use mistakes, routine mistakes. They use new technological advances, but this is all made under the auspices of the Kiev regime. We believe that long-term threat to the international information security is posed by the Kiev regime and those Western countries that sponsor it at the behest of its authorities and Western sponsors. The country, Ukraine, that is, has turned into a safe haven for hundreds of cyber criminals and online scammers. And they work not only against Russia, but also against other countries. There were special operations within the European Union states to expose and to arrest to bring charges against digital criminals in Ukraine. That's the way to answer your question. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ria Novosti, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello, Christina Rodriguez, RIA Novosti. We have one question, but a big one. I would kindly ask you, Madam Zakharova, to comment on the information that we got this morning from the Russian intelligence service that the EU wants to create its own nuclear weapons. You know, I believe that this information has value in itself and it should have a follow-up from the legal standpoint. Certainly, when it comes to messages, especially the ones that are based on facts and not just assessments from the Russian intelligence service, should be treated exceptionally seriously. The recent developments are regretful. We see growing interest to the nuclear weapons by European capitals that up until recently stood for swift nuclear disarmament. With each passing day, we see new statements by anonymous or not anonymous European politicians that muse about how good it would be to get this type of weapons, or at least to have another nuclear umbrella to equip themselves, and they need to do that allegedly for safety reasons. They hid before that. They were hiding before the solidarity, under the solidarity umbrella, but after the Strait of Hormuz had changed, we know that virtually a month ago it was raised by Emmanuel Macron, besides the intention of Paris to start non-transparent building of its nuclear stockpile, nuclear deterrent stockpile. He also announced some kind of advanced or enforced algorithms of nuclear deterrence carried out by France, and European non-nuclear countries are to be involved in it, allegedly. Actually, it takes my breath away to witness how they are fighting economy-wise, policy-wise. Well, they present it as some kind of a solidarity, but it is interesting to know when these non-nuclear states get nuclear weapons, how will it all happen and what it will result into? That is an open question. All at once, Europe sees a row of those who wish to join such schemes. In many ways, this copies the American approaches to this expanded nuclear deterrence. It is interesting that the Americans deployed their nuclear arsenals in Western Europe, and at the same time playing with it, managing it, or having any access whatsoever, it was not given to these countries. That means that the countries of the EU have these nuclear weapons, but what happens with that? What is the state of these weapons? Let alone the fact that these countries could decide its fate? This question has never even been discussed. And the EU countries never received any report from Washington on what is happening with the nuclear weapons in their country. In terms of the industrial and technological framework, naturally there are a lot of countries in Europe with a developed nuclear fuel cycle. The IAEA should have a closer look on them. Overall, such pro-nuclear movement clearly erodes and weakens the global non-proliferation regime. And there are statements that are made on NPT commitments by European countries. At the same time, they're not against getting nuclear weapons, and these statements are not credible. They say, first, we need to get nuclear weapons, and what will happen next, and how it will be regulated in the international legal framework. Nobody is talking about that. Nobody follows the following logic. First, you need to take a look at the legal framework and how it can be introduced in the international commitment so that it would be not at odds with anything. Nobody is having this kind of a conversation. Nobody is pursuing this policy. All these matters naturally should be carefully considered within the NPT review conference that is opening on the 27th of April. We believe that one of the key tasks to strengthen the NPT regime is to curb the destructive aspiration by Europeans and to put an end to this frenzy in Europe and people that dream about nuclear weapons. Thank you. Lenta.ru, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. We have 3 questions today. The first one is as follows. Recently, President Trump provided weapons to Iranian mass rallies, and what's the take on this? Does it mean that they want to organize a coup in Iran?
So even out of the context of the current tragic war, we adhere to the provisions of the UN, non-interference in domestic affairs of states. It's our basic approach, but talking about the situation unwinding in the region now, Washington is not its first call for violent destabilization in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the collapse of the country's statehood. What is the outcome of such interference in the internal affairs of other states? Namely, regime change or dismantling authorities. Just remember Libya, Syria, and Iraq. In recent years, we have witnessed a significant number of externally inspired color revolutions leading to the collapse of statehood, civil wars, and conflicts and devastating humanitarian crises. Every time, the primary victims were ordinary people whose lives, freedom, and well-being Western countries seem to be so concerned about it, but they have become bargaining chips in the geopolitical games of Western countries. I would repeat, our position remains the same. We categorically condemn such calls, such aggressive actions. They are not acceptable, especially if they are intended to justify external military aggression and intervention. Thank you. My next question. On the 6th of April, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko is meeting with CSTO Secretary General Teat Massadikov called for a very careful and cautious approach to Armenia due to the upcoming parliamentary elections. How does Moscow assess the impact of the upcoming elections on ongoing interaction with Yerevan within the organization? The issue of Russian-Armenian relations has been discussed in details during the latest meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. His working visit to Moscow on the 1st of April. In the context of the upcoming elections in Armenia, Russia's principal position has been emphasized. We do not interfere into the domestic political affairs of other states. Regarding Armenia, for decades, we are united by diverse ties, history, and civilizational dimension. A 2 million Armenian diaspora resides in Russia. For them, It's part of their historical nature. The ties, they cannot just be severed, cannot be abandoned. It would be just too painful. But we cannot ignore the processes in the Republic and hope that pro-Russian forces will be able to freely participate in the expression of the will of Armenian citizens. We're just not discussing interference in domestic affairs now. It's not that. But all the Armenian citizens have the right to vote. But they support ties with Russia based on objective factors. It would be democratic and free expression of will, as it should be done in democratic countries. So it's just in a totally hasty manner adopted amendments to the election code of the Republic of Armenia. And the new measures will envisage serious restrictions in the names of the political forces participating in elections. It's very important for that not to purposefully restrict the electoral opportunities of the opposition. So maybe those who have stood for developing such measures, they will explain the purpose of that, but we just remember very recently Nikol Pashinyan. It's a quotation. It's a quotation by Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister of Armenia. Armenia, he has said, is a democratic country. You have mentioned the CSTO as well. Yes, it was mostly in the CSTO context. Yes, so many speculations here and so many assessments in Armenia itself by Armenian political figures and political forces. It somehow looks not very clean. There is a legally formulated agreement, just you name it, some understanding, solution, that obviously demonstrates the membership of Yerevan, the full-fledged CSTO membership with its obligations and its rights. Some other solution has not been adopted by anyone, despite some verbal speculations, some offenses, false publications, and so on. We are interested in their full-fledged participation in our common structure in security. Thank you. And my final question. Moldova's President, National Security Advisor Stanislav Sicriero stated Chisinau's willingness to share experience with the European Union in combating alleged Russian interference in elections. How does Moscow assess this statement by the Moldovan official? You know, there are no other types of manifestations by officials and the regime. They just exchange lies, fantasies with the EU. Maybe if they had something else like products, financial achievements, technologies, they would have exchanged that, but either the European Union not spreading its arms for that, or there are some other reasons that's what they exchange. But seriously, we view this statement as yet another manifestation of official Chisinau's anti-Russian policy. Unfounded accusations of Russia's non-existent interference in Moldova's electoral processes has become one of the methods of its implementation. Moldovan officials cannot provide any evidence of Russia's involvement. They have not provided anything before, they do not provide anything now. Why? It's not because they do not want. They have no proof, they have no words. They have just fake words, fake accusations. I would remind you, during presidential elections in Moldova, independent media drew attention to some other situation, massive violations of voter rights by the Moldovan authorities themselves. The European sponsors assisted the Moldovan authorities in that, helped to violate their own Moldovan laws. Chisinau was actively visited by European politicians and officials not to monitor the observance of norms during the elections, but to campaign for specific political forces. They promised to continue financial support to certain politicians, to certain social groups. In case of election, in case of winning of the specific political figures pointed out by themselves. It was just buying, it was financial blackmail, and that was implemented with regard to Moldovan voters by the Standard regime group and its Western partners, patrons and sponsors. Experts and political scientists mentioned the lack of transparency in voting, like mail voting in Western Europe and North America. Mass transportation of voters to polling stations located there. You just remember manipulations with bulletins and election polling stations on the territory of Russia. Russia was ready to open polling stations at the request of Moldovan authorities, but the Moldovan authorities did their best to open a minimum number of polling stations on the territory of Russia, although there were a lot of Moldovan citizens who were willing to vote. So there is no doubt what experience Chisinau and Brussels intend to share. Fakes and lies. So thank you. Is Veryl with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. I have two questions. First of all, could you comment on the statement by the Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry, which demanded that the Russian side not mention Nagorno-Karabakh, and despite the fact that Azerbaijan actively comments on the issue of Russia's sovereignty over the new entities, considering them part of Ukrainian territory. So the response to those statements will be conveyed to the Azerbaijani side, and starting from the 90s, we have facilitated in resolving issues between Baku and Yerevan. Russia's peacekeeper contingent has ensured ceasefire in the region and launched the stage of Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization in all spheres, and the summit agreements reached in 2020 and 2022. I will post links to those documents in the text version of today's briefing. In a joint statement adopted under the auspices of the EU in Prague on the 6th of October 2022, it was about Armenia and Azerbaijan's recognition of each other's territorial integrity In recent years, Baku and Yerevan have opted for direct dialogue without mediators. We have supported this decision and understood it, and supported constructive steps aimed at achieving sustainable peace and stability in the South Caucasus. We welcome the initiation of the establishment of peace and anti-state relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the agreement of the reached in August 2025. Yes, many things remain in Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization and to make it irreversible, including peace treaty, restoring transport and economic ties in the region, delimitation and demarcation, strengthening mutual trust between the two peoples. We will provide assistance to Baku and Yerevan on all those tracks. And that's the case when we would like to hope that irreversible will have positive connotation. Yes, thank you. One more question. Could you comment on Alen Semonyan's words, the Speaker of the Armenian Parliament? Oh, hello again. Why are you doing that with Mr. Simonyan? Could you please tell me? You have some personal negative relation to him? No, just my question. Taking into account the visit by Mr. Overchuk, so about Armenia withdrawing from the CSTO and the Eurasian Economic Union, if Russia decides to raise prices of its gas supplied to Armenia. So it reminds a little bit that story, Threats to Hedgehog, by showing its opportunities. I do not want to comment seriously on the statements by emotional politicians that have done so many dubious statements. On the issue of the CSTO, we have heard many things. I would remind you, we hope it's not blocked in Armenia. When it was told that it's not Armenia that's withdrawing from the CSTO, but the CSTO withdrawing from Armenia, has this process dominated or is it still underway? Why go back to that and provide some assessments to those emotional statements? It's Armenian citizens who should comment on that primarily, because it's the leaders of Armenia, those building the future of the country. So the citizens of that country, they should be asked what are their assessments of those statements. But I would like to say seriously, the issue of gas supplies to the Republic, it was discussed during the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Nikol Pashinyan on the 1st of April in Moscow. Specific numbers were cited, and I would remind them. Armenia receives Russian gas for $177.50, while in Europe the price reaches $600. This example, it's not an emotion, it's a fact. There are no speculations here, there are numbers. Numbers confirmed by objective data. And the Armenian leadership thinking about the security safety of its country. It's one of the primary tasks of any state, especially this fire situation in gas markets and the Middle East situation. The European politicians are just thinking how not to fall victim to that instability and that turbulence on energy markets because of the unprovoked baseless aggression of the US and Israel against Iran. Now about the EAU, I think you have mentioned that in your question. I would like to remind you the objective data. Armenia's accession to the EAU in 2015 is recognized by Armenian economists, serves as the foundation of the republic's well-being. Now I will cite an example that is not emotional, that is specific. Armenia's GDP has nearly tripled over the past 10 years from $10.5 billion to $29.2 billion. And let us finalize the answer to your question by the CSTO issue. We have commented on this topic on numerous occasions. Yes, the CSTO is connected with ensuring the security of Armenia as well as other members of this organization. Now the Republic's membership in the CSTO is frozen, but this choice has been made by the current Armenian authorities. Thank you. Thank you.
С нами ли
Arti Balkans, are you here with us? Hello. Good day, Madam Zakharova. As you know already, explosives are found in Serbia near the gas pipeline. We're interested in interaction between the relevant authorities of Serbia and Russia on exchanging information regarding the perpetrators, those who are organized this sabotage, and are there traces that Ukraine might be involved, especially given the attacks on Turk Stream and Blue Stream that were repeatedly carried out, and what conclusions should be drawn by Serbia, and how should it respond given the recent prolonging of the gas supply contract with Russia? You know, as of now, as we understand, the relevant bodies of Serbia are investigating this incident. So when it comes to the conclusions, we will make them publicly once the relevant results are published, and certainly we keep track of the actions carried out by the competent authorities of Serbia. But I would like to emphasize that repeatedly during briefings we noted that deliberate attacks against energy infrastructure became the hallmark of the Kiev regime, and therefore I believe that many politicians in Serbia, as well as activists, journalists, political scientists, experts, and rank-and-file grassroots Serbians, citizens of their country, started asking themselves whether the relevant conclusion shall be made right now. Who needs that and who perpetrated that? Once again, we always assume that an investigation is needed, building upon facts. But indeed, what do they say in the West? You did it because you could do that and because you did it in the past. Judging by this logic presented by the Western countries, everything hints on who did it. Once again, it's not our approach, but this meets the narratives used in various situations when our country was accused. Take a look at this. Only throughout the truth proposed by Trump in 2026, 226 airstrikes were made by Ukraine against energy infrastructure during this truce. And there were systematic attacks against the Druzhba, a friendship pipeline, and this was detrimental not only to our country. So we cannot say that this is part of the hostilities. These are strikes that were deliberate in order to do damage, including to Hungary and to Slovakia. In 2025 alone, pumping stations were damaged namely Novosibko, Nikolskoye, and the hub was damaged and was attacked at least 3 times by the Kiev regime. Let me remind you that from the legal standpoint, these actions are described purely as terrorism. Certainly, the Bankova Street would not allow themselves to make these strikes without the support of Western mentors. And it could happen once, and in this case, we could have said that the Western sponsors failed to put an end to this, but since we're talking about multiple strikes, and I provided specific examples, that means that they didn't say no to that, and against this context, when it comes to the pioneers in the terrorist actions, we can claim that former US President Biden was behind that. He directly promised to put an end to the Nord Stream. And his senior officials, namely Under Secretary of State Nuland, delved on that, and she said that it will be definitely done. She had some follow-up questions to the White House, how it will be done. And do you remember what they said? We'll find a way. And in 6 months' time, the Nord Stream was undermined. There was an explosion on that. Getting back to your question, we will wait for the investigation to be finalized and all the actions carried out by the security services and the law enforcement of Serbia will build upon facts, naturally. But once again, I get back to the narrative that was used against our country by the collective West. When we were accused, they said, you did it not because we need some evidence, but because you did it in the past, as they claim it, and you have such an opportunity. I provided specific facts to you, unlike them who didn't provide specific facts. Do you have any other questions? No? If that is the case, moving on. Sputnik, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. I have one question today. Getting back to Iran, the US administration regularly either demands that Iran should open the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz or threatens that the Iranian civilization will end, or concludes a truce that is violated by Israel. Why is this position by Washington so inconsistent when it comes to Iran? Well, we're talking about this miraculous democracy, Western style. It's not about organizing a society. It's not about expression of public will. It's not about providing mandate and delegating the mandate to the representatives, but it is the kind of approach that you've mentioned, and that's what they call our democracy or American democracy. That is the American democracy, their democracy that they cherish so much. They say we need to defend the American democracy, and that's how they do it. You know, we'll not comment right now something that we made assessments to on hot heels immediately. Let us hope that this will be the new stage of negotiations, political and diplomatic solution that would lead to long-term positive outcome. We have been repeatedly assuming that there is no alternative to the diplomatic settlement, and that's what will be the focus for us later on. Let me highlight that over the past 6 weeks we have had a consistent policy, and judging by the developments of tonight, it confirmed to be correct. Let us hope that the developments of today will lead to a long-term peace in the region that would be credible and long-term. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on. Izvestia, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. You have partially answered our question regarding the flagrant situation regarding the explosions at the Turk Stream. A follow-up question. Do you think that these actions could affect future relations between Russia and European partners in the energy sector? Is there a risk that such actions could escalate in other regions where there is Russian energy infrastructure? Could it happen in the future? I would start with the second part of your question because when it comes to the first part, I have nothing to add. Our relations with the European Union were severed, were undermined. I'm not talking about official relations, but I'm talking about the gamut of relations. They were damaged by the EU countries, and our crucial position has not changed. We were not the ones who started the smear campaign. This was not our choice to abandon really good results that we have managed to achieve throughout a span of time. We are responding, we're defending our national interests, defending vital positions, given something that was unleashed against our country, namely an outright hybrid war with the participation of the EU as an institution and its member states. What can I add to that? If they change their position, their behavior, we will look at how we can change our response. There's nothing to comment so far. Your second question pertained to the fact whether this destabilization could be spread, whether attacks could be made, or whether terrorist attacks could be committed against Russian energy civil infrastructure. I have a clarification. Why are you only talking about Russian infrastructure? Take a look at that. The Kiev regime is striking everything that is of interest to it, judging and guided by its own goals and guided by the orders given from Western sponsors. If they want to destabilize the situation in the Balkans, they will do this in that way. If they have to threaten bilateral ties between Russia and other countries in the energy sector, they will start attacking this energy infrastructure as well. But why do you confine this question only to our country? You see and you know from the history that once a group, a state, a political group opts for terrorism, the black hole starts and everything is being plunged into this black hole. It has no control, it has no limits. There is no logic to that, only one logic. This outright terrorist impunity. How can you affect that? You need to carry out some anti-terrorism measures. You should repel it from the political standpoint, but when it comes to the EU, nobody repels the Kiev regime in the EU except for separate members. Some places it's bet on the Kiev regime as a tool that was used by the American ultra-liberals. Many in the European capitals expect them to be their new handlers. Some of them are scared. Somebody else does not have such capabilities because they lost their sovereignty, although we're talking about the European democracy. But most importantly, once again, it is not Ukraine as a state. It is about the Kiev regime as a terrorist neo-Nazi grouping that carries out its terrorist activities not within some kind of a law or going outside the law, but it is doing it, and it is a pure terrorism, classic international terrorist outcasts. I can cite other facts if you want. We talked a lot about, and during this briefing and every time we talk about repeated attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces on Russian energy facilities. For instance, Druzhba pipeline on the 27th of January, the Kiev regime stopped Russian supplies via this pipeline to Slovakia and Hungary, citing that there are some damages done. Orban commented on that on the 17th of March. Viktor Orban said, "The situation is clear. There is oil, there is money. This pipeline was damaged 22 times and it was repaired. And several weeks before our presidential election, on the 23rd time, for some reason, it is not repaired. We do not believe these fairy tales." End of quote. In the first week of April, the Bandera regime had another attack using 3 drones on the pumping station Ruska. This is the starting point of Turk's Stream pipeline. It took place on the 2nd of April and it was repelled by the MOD systems and the operation was not destroyed. On the 6th of April, the Kiev regime carried out a large-scale attack using drones against Caspian Pipeline Consortium in the port of Novorossiysk. Civil infrastructure was severely damaged. Dozens of residential houses were damaged. According to latest data, civilians were also affected, and our crucial position on this matter has not changed. It's not that we condemn, but we do not tolerate the attacks on civil infrastructure. They do damage to the stability of energy supplies as well as to the welfare of many states. They have a negative impact on regional and global energy security. Given the ongoing energy crisis, such attacks only deteriorate the growing problems, including the ones in Europe. If you have no further questions, let's move on. Bold news. Hello, Madam Zakharova. A landmark date is coming close. On the 9th of April, Russian troops seized Königsberg, which is currently Kaliningrad. Many people in Lithuania and Poland claim that this is a potential threat. They even wanted to rename it and to block it. Is it a real threat for Russia, or is it a simple irritant? And do you have an action plan? We have to state that lately the situation in the Baltic region is seeing a high level of tension, according to diplomats and political scientists. Let's take a look at the situation on the ground. Close to the Russian borders, around the Kaliningrad region, there is an ongoing military NATO buildup. What does it mean? Troops are building up, are being deployed. More large-scale offensive military exercises are carried out, and the target is our country. And against this current geopolitical landscape, our exclave indeed faces a number of serious challenges. Under some far-fetched pretext, the EU and Baltic states, especially Lithuania, tries to stand in the way of the well-being of the region and impede transport and cargo transit. And this is at odds with the arrangements, including partnership and cooperation agreement of 1994 between Russia and the EU, and an agreement on transit between Russia and the region of Kaliningrad, and the statement on Russia-EU relations, Russia-Lithuania intergovernmental agreement on simplified transfer documents. From time to time, they voice ideas of some kind of a complete external blockade of the Kaliningrad region to harshen up control over the waters of the Baltic Sea and to make impediments to the international shipments, given the degrading economic situation in the Baltic countries, and their welfare depended on the relations with Russia and the Kaliningrad region, and they lost these opportunities not because our country wanted to deprive them of these opportunities, but because they did it to themselves. And it comes as no surprise. Some of our former partners wanted to make things better for themselves in order to fuel tension in the Baltic region. Probably somebody gets money for this job and they stay afloat because of that. We believe that such steps are aggressive, and we take seriously that. Russia has repeatedly claimed that we are ready to provide security to the Kaliningrad region by all means affordable and accessible. An important message was something that was voiced during the direct line in December 2025, namely the warning by President Putin. And he said there is an escalation of the conflict, and there will be an escalation should the Kaliningrad region be blocked.
Apart from the celebration on the 9th of April of another anniversary of the storm of Königsberg, there is one more historical landmark date. That's the Kaliningrad region appearance, and it has become a tourist center of our country. Despite unfavorable external circumstances, artificially created actually by mad political figures of the European Union and Brussels, who are just mad with their anger. Our region continues to dynamically develop and overcome the existing difficulties. With the support of the federal authorities, we have many events planned for this anniversary, with the participation of cultural figures and representatives from foreign states. So thank you very much for your question. We will publish further materials on this issue on our online resources. And now I congratulate our compatriots, our citizens, and the leaders of the Kaliningrad region. I congratulate you on this anniversary, and we wish you successful celebrations, and we are in touch, taking into account the international political context I have mentioned today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is author I with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, Ruslan Pankratov, author I. We have one question today, and it's about the UAVs flying over Baltic states in order to strike deep into the Russian Federation territory. On the 21st of March, Dmitry Peskov warned of appropriate measures if Ukrainian army drones are flown over the Baltics. So the drones continue to fly, and the Baltic states citizens say they are allegedly not aware of anything, and they are unable to detect such drones with their radars. And there is a conspirological version that those drones, maybe they are not flying over, but launched from the territory of those states. So could you share your point of view on this situation and measures? So certainly we consider drone incidents as terrorist attacks against the Russian Federation, attacks on the Russian Federation, its industrial and civilian facilities, and if those third countries are providing and have provided their territory for enemy drone flights, and we're sure they are fully aware of the risks they are exposed to. For more detailed information, of course, regarding the reaction based on drone flights, I would recommend to consult the relevant agencies. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is the Voice of the Fatherland with us? Yes, Voice of the Fatherland is here. Hello, Madam Zakharova. Yes, hello. France, Great Britain, and other European NATO member countries have recently demonstrated their insubordination to the United States of America, represented by Trump, in their hostilities in the Middle East against Iran. This could be the expression of European sovereignty, or maybe self-preservation. Could there be some orchestrated play, NATO split, in order to protect the United States in the conflict planned by them, conflict between Europe and Russia? Yes, maybe we should seek for the roots in another place. It's the EU countries and collective Brussels. They just support the policy of American ultra-liberals. They do not hide that. They share those values. They are engaged in propaganda of that frenzy, gender-destroying, satanic madness. It's they have just alleged their readiness to comply with that anti-humane, anti-social ideology. So we should seek the reply to your question here. Another issue: who has made you believe this idea that this solidarity within NATO, this solidarity actually exists? Who made you believe that? Solidarity is some internal call. It's voluntary will to help, to be nearby. Even despite the circumstances, what we see in NATO is some Baton system. Now it's also collecting money, what Belgium Prime Minister has mentioned. Within the EU, for them it's to choose between happy vassals and unhappy slaves. They were talking about vassal subordination or slavery with regard to the United States of America, but you are talking about solidarity. Solidarity is among the equal. It's equal rights, and not subordination through force and because of the lack of some freedom. Thank you. Thank you. And my second question: if European NATO countries have the sovereignty, some common sense, independence, but no, I have just replied the question. But in my first question, it was not about solidarity, so thank you for the reply to this question. Thank you. If you have no more questions, I'm just checking once again. Goodbye until next time. Wish you all the best. So we have questions. For some reason, we're not in the list. news.ru. How would you comment on the fact that on the 2nd, 3rd of April, France, together with China, blocked the UN Security Council resolution that would allow to open the Strait of Hormuz? Is it possible to regard this move as an example of pragmatic engagement? So, as you have said, Russia and China blocked. Yes, on the 2nd, 3rd of April, France, along with Russia and China, blocked in the UN Security Council the resolution Arab initiative that would allow the use of force to open the Strait of Hormuz. Can we regard this move by Paris as an example of pragmatic engagement with Russia and China despite existing disagreements? So I will just clarify this issue, what is meant. Our approach to the Bahrain resolution draft, I have mentioned it at the beginning of the briefing. Yes, we have actually blocked this draft, and the Chinese representative also took the same stance. France did not join this approach. That's the first answer to your question. And now the second part is some tactical preferences of Paris. As you have said, not solidarity, but cooperation, engagement. We should not mention it here because the French government adds money and weapons to the Kiev regime, supplies it, and it is used for terrorist purposes against civilian population. We have never heard from Mr. Macron, the French president, and his Minister of Foreign Affairs, his government, any words of compassion, solidarity, or support with regard to the killings of civilian population of our country. That's the answer to your question. That's the position of the current French regime. So let us not fantasize, but have a look at the facts and be based on those facts in our statements and not remain in illusions. We have the reality. Thank you very much.